"Father, I'm so cold." The faint voice of his youngest granddaughter, Ilara, cut through the icy silence of the abandoned village. Kyle, the widower with calloused hands, felt his heart clench as fever consumed his two little granddaughters. Exiled, homeless, and with death lurking in every cough, he had dragged them to that cursed place, their last hope against a cruel fate. As the wind howled through the ruins and the last ray of sun painted the sky a somber red, Kyle held his granddaughter's feverish hands, silently vowing he would find a cure. But what he was about to unearth in the depths of that forgotten place was far more ancient and perilous than any legend could tell. Kyle felt a shiver run down his spine, not just from the village's icy cold, but from the gravity of those unspoken words. His granddaughters, Ayla and Ilara, lay feverish in the makeshift shack, each cough from Ayla and every faint moan from Ilara a cruel reminder of time slipping away. The promise of a cure he had made to himself was a heavy burden, yet also the only flame amidst the darkness surrounding him. He needed to find something, anything, before the fever consumed them entirely. He stood, his knees creaking and his eyes swept the interior of the shelter. The few herbs he knew had already failed. Hope, he knew, was a treasure rarer than gold. With a tender kiss on each granddaughter's forehead, Kyle murmured, "I'll look a little longer, my little ones. I won't be long." Ayla opened her eyes briefly, a faint glimmer of trust in them, and Kyle felt a pang of renewed strength. He stepped out into the growing darkness, the cold penetrating his worn clothes. The village of shadows was a labyrinth of crumbling houses, fallen roofs, and moss-covered walls. Each step was a reminder of the desolation, an echo of the plague that, legend said, had swept the place. Kyle scoured the corners, turned over stones, searching for any trace of life or healing, but found only dust and oppressive silence. Loneliness was a constant companion. The whispers of the wind seemed to mock his misery. Kyle's mind drifted to his wife, to the pain of loss mingled with an even greater fear, that of losing the last living memories of his love. He felt like a failure, unable to protect what little he had left. But then the pale faces of Ayla and Ilara resurfaced, igniting a stubborn flame of determination. He could not surrender to self-pity. His steps led him, almost unwittingly, to the center of the village, where the ruins of the old church stood, more imposing and somber than the rest. Legends spoke of terrible things there, but Kyle's desperation was greater than any superstition. He needed a miracle. With trembling hands, he began to clear the debris from the entrance, feeling the cold, damp stone beneath his fingers. Each piece of rock removed was an act of faith. Suddenly, his fingers brushed against something hollow, a crevice hidden beneath a heavy slab he could barely move. Curiosity and urgency propelled him. With superhuman effort, Kyle pushed away the slab, revealing a dark, narrow passage, almost imperceptible. The air there was dense, heavy with the scent of earth and time. He hesitated for an instant, his heart pounding in his chest, but the image of his ailing granddaughters spurred him onward. Descending the uneven steps, Kyle entered the darkness. The faint moonlight filtering through the crevice barely illuminated the path. In the depths of the passage, a subtle glow caught his attention. It was an ancient reliquary made of dark metal and encrusted with opaque stones, resting on a small stone pedestal. Beside it, a dusty, rolled-up parchment. With hands still trembling, Kyle opened the reliquary. Inside, there was no gold or jewels, but a small glass vial containing a liquid that radiated a soft, golden light, an elixir. Unrolling the parchment, he saw a detailed map of forgotten medicinal herbs and instructions in ancient script. A healing power that the village of shadows held, not as a curse, but as a promise. Hope finally ignited in his chest, a light that promised to drive away the shadows. Kale held the reliquary and the parchment, his hands now trembling not from fear, but from overwhelming emotion. The air in the secret passage felt lighter, more breathable. The golden light of the elixir pulsed, a tiny heart in his hands. He couldn't lose a second. With the urgency of a father who sees his children on the brink of an abyss, Kyle climbed the uneven steps, the dusty map held firmly under his arm. The heavy slab was pushed back with unexpected strength, and he emerged from the depths of the ruined church, the icy night air now feeling invigorating. Back in the shack, Kyle found Ayla and Ilara even paler, their breaths short and shallow. The grandfather's heart clenched, but the newfound hope was a shield against despair. Delicately, he opened the elixir vial. The golden liquid shimmered in the faint light of the dying fire. "My little ones, Grandpa found something. Please, drink," he whispered, his voice choked. First, Ilara, who swallowed a little with a faint moan, then Ayla, who, with effort, managed to drink a larger gulp. Kyle watched, breath held, for any sign, any change. For a few minutes, nothing. The fever persisted. Their small bodies still burned. A pang of doubt threatened to pierce his new faith, but he repelled it with the image of the map. The elixir was only one part. The parchment revealed a series of rare herbs, some Kyle barely recognized, others he had never heard of. Their names were written in elegant script, accompanied by small drawings indicating their growth locations within the village. With the moon already high, Kyle took his old lantern and a cloth bag and went out again. This time, his steps were firmer, guided by a clear purpose. He followed the map's instructions, which led him to forgotten corners of the Village of Shadows, to places he had avoided for fear of the legends. Beneath the ruins of an old inn, he found the moon lily, a bluish-petaled flower that bloomed only at night. Near the dry well, among the mossy stones, was the whisper root, whose leaves seemed to vibrate to the touch. Each discovery was a small triumph, a link reforging between him and that place which had once seemed so hostile. Kale gathered the herbs with reverence, feeling the texture of each leaf, the scent of each root. The map was incredibly precise, revealing not only where the plants were, but also how they should be harvested and prepared. He worked under the flickering light of the lantern, his calloused fingers moving with surprising agility for his age. Weariness was immense, but adrenaline and hope kept him on his feet. He thought of his wife, how proud she would have been of his determination, and this gave him even more strength. Upon returning to the shack, the sun began to peek over the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. Kyle boiled water in a small pot and prepared an infusion with the herbs, following the parchment's instructions to the letter. The earthy, fresh aroma filled the small room. Carefully, he gave the mixture to his granddaughters, one sip at a time. Ayla coughed faintly, but this time the cough seemed less harsh. Ilara, who had seemed almost lifeless before, moved a finger. Kyle felt a wave of relief so profound it almost brought him to his knees. He knelt beside them, watching. Slowly, their pale skin began to regain a healthier color. Their breathing became more regular. The fever, which had seemed an uncontrollable fire, began to recede, leaving behind only a gentle warmth. Silent tears streamed down Kyle's weathered face. They were not tears of sadness, but of immense gratitude, of a love that had found a way to manifest even in the depths of despair. He had saved his granddaughters. The Village of Shadows, which he had feared as a tomb, had revealed itself as a cradle of life. The curse unraveled, revealing a sanctuary. Kale knew his purpose now was greater than merely surviving. He had a legacy to protect, knowledge to restore, so that no one else would have to face the darkness without a light of hope. The morning sun peeked through the shack's crevices, kissing the serene faces of Ayla and Ilara. Kyle, exhausted but with a peace in his soul he hadn't felt in a long time, watched his granddaughters sleep. The fever had completely receded, leaving behind only soft, regular breathing. He touched Ayla's forehead, then Ilara's. They were cool. A wave of gratitude so intense washed over him that his eyes welled up, but this time they were tears of joy and relief. The weight he had carried on his shoulders for weeks, perhaps months, dissipated, leaving a void filled with vibrant hope. He sat on the packed earth floor, leaning his back against the cold wall, and closed his eyes. The image of the reliquary, the golden elixir, and the dusty map danced in his mind. The village of shadows, which had once represented the end of everything, the last stop of his despair, had revealed itself as a new beginning. It was not a cursed place, but a sanctuary, a treasure of forgotten wisdom. The irony was palpable. He, an old widower exiled from his lands, had found his true home and purpose in the ruins of a place everyone feared. There was much to do. The parchment was not just a map of herbs, it was a compendium of healing and harmony. Cale felt the weight of this legacy, not as a burden, but as a responsibility. He was not a healer, never had been, but life had pushed him onto this path. His fingers, once strong for the plough, would now have to learn the delicacy of leaves and the precision of mixtures. He wondered if he would be up to the task, a simple, aged man. But the sight of Ayla and Ilara sleeping peacefully was the most powerful answer. For them, for his wife, for all who might one day need it, he would do it. With a sigh that carried the promise of a future, Kyle stood. The shack, once a temporary refuge, now seemed the starting point of a great journey. He picked up the parchment, unrolling it carefully. The ancient script seemed clearer in the daylight. There were diagrams of plants, descriptions of their properties, and even harvesting rituals that spoke of respect and connection to the earth. Kyle felt a deep connection with the ancient guardians of this knowledge, people who, like him, had perhaps been driven by love and the need to heal. His gaze swept the small room, then extended to the ruins outside. The church, which had once seemed a monument to misfortune, now harbored the memory of a vital secret. He would need to explore every corner of the village with new eyes, not in search of survival, but of restoration. The idea of cleaning the houses, cultivating a medicinal herb garden, perhaps even rebuilding parts of the church to house this knowledge, began to take shape in his mind. It would be arduous, solitary work, but not impossible. Cale approached his granddaughters, kneeling beside them. Ayla stirred, slowly opening her eyes and meeting her grandfather's. A small smile appeared on her lips, and she extended a weak little hand to touch his face. "Grandpa," she whispered, her voice still hoarse, but with a tone of life Kyle hadn't heard in days. He held her hand, feeling its warmth and softness. "I'm here, my little one, and everything will be all right." Ilara also began to stir, blinking her eyes. The fear had dissipated, replaced by a sense of purpose. Kyle knew that the village of shadows would no longer be a place of shadows, but of light, of healing, of hope. He would be the guardian of this legacy, and his granddaughters the reason and inspiration for every step. The path ahead was long, but Kyle was ready. He had a new home, a new family, and a new destiny. Ayla snuggled into Kyle, her small body still a little weak, but the warmth emanating from her was of life, no longer of fever. Ilara, beside her, opened her blue eyes and let out a soft sigh, as if waking from a deep restorative sleep. Cale felt every fiber of his being relax, a wave of relief so great it almost made him weep again. He ran his hand through Ayla's fine hair, then Ilara's, feeling their softness and normal temperature. "My stars, you are well," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Ayla's smile was a ray of sunshine in the shack, and Ilara tried to stretch her arms towards him, a gesture that filled the grandfather's heart with indescribable joy. The sun was already high, and the light filtering through the shack's crevices revealed the dust and simplicity of the place, but to Kale, everything seemed bathed in a new aura. He sat on the floor, watching his granddaughters, who were now trying to sit up, leaning on each other. Weakness was still visible, but vitality was returning. Kyle felt a tug in his chest. The promise he had made to his late wife to protect what remained of his family was being fulfilled. But it was not the end. It was only the beginning. With the parchment still in hand, Kyle began to study it more closely. The ancient script, once mysterious, now seemed to invite him. He realized that the map not only indicated the location of the herbs, but also the best times to harvest them, the correct way to dry them, and the exact proportions for each type of ailment. It was a science, an art, and he, a simple farmer, felt like an apprentice before a vast knowledge. The responsibility weighed heavily, but the image of his recovered granddaughters was his greatest incentive. "Grandpa, I'm hungry," Ayla said, her voice a little stronger. Kale smiled, a genuine smile he hadn't given in a long time. "I'll prepare something soon, my little one. You'll be strong again before long." He stood, his knees still a little sore, but the energy he felt was different, invigorating. He needed fresh water, simple but nutritious food, and he needed to start organizing that knowledge. He left the shack for a moment, his granddaughters falling asleep again in a peaceful slumber. The village of shadows stretched before him, the ruins now seeming less threatening, more like a puzzle waiting to be assembled. The church, in particular, caught his attention. It was not just the place where he had found the reliquary, but the heart of that forgotten sanctuary. Kyle knew that the first step would be to organize what he had learned. Perhaps create a small herb garden near the shack, so he wouldn't have to venture so far. The village's solitude was still palpable, but Kyle no longer felt alone. He felt the presence of the ancient guardians, the wisdom that surrounded him. The work would be immense, the challenges many. He had no proper tools, nor the strength of a young man, but he had the experience of a lifetime of hard work, and more importantly, the determination of a grandfather who had just seen his granddaughters return from the brink of the abyss. He would do this not just for Ayla and Ilara, but for all who might one day need healing and hope. Kyle went back inside, took the parchment and the reliquary, and put them away with reverence. He knelt beside his granddaughters, watching them. Their faces, once marked by illness, now radiated a peace that warmed his soul. He promised himself that he would transform that village, stone by stone, leaf by leaf, into a beacon of healing. The path would be long, but Kyle, the old widower, was ready to embrace his new destiny, to transform the curse into a legacy of hope. Kale, the old widower, was ready to embrace his new destiny, transforming the curse into a legacy of hope. The light of healing would shine brightly in that forgotten place. He spent the rest of the morning organizing the small shack, moving stones to create a space for the future herb garden, dusting the makeshift shelves to store the parchment and the reliquary. Every movement was an act of faith, a silent promise to his granddaughters and to the ancient guardians of the village. Ayla and Ilara, growing stronger by the hour, watched him with curious eyes, their small smiles renewing Kale's energy. He told them stories about the plants he would gather, about the magic of nature, and about how that place, once so somber, would become a refuge of light. In the afternoon, with his granddaughters sleeping peacefully again, Kale felt the call of the church. There was something more there, he knew. Not just the reliquary, but the structure itself, the ancient walls, the symbols carved into the stones. He took his lantern, now more a tool of exploration than of fear, and headed towards the ruins. The air inside the church was cool and heavy, laden with centuries of silence. Kyle walked slowly, his steps echoing, examining every detail with a newfound reverence. Legend spoke of a plague, but the parchment had revealed a cure. What else did the village hide? His eyes scanned the walls, noticing worn carvings that seemed to tell a story in ancient symbols. In a corner, beneath a pile of rubble he hadn't noticed before, there was a small, almost imperceptible opening. With his calloused hands, Kyle began to remove the stones, one by one, feeling the cold roughness beneath his fingers, revealing a small, hidden chamber. His heart pounded, a drum of expectation. What would he find there? There was no fear, only a burning curiosity that propelled him. He pushed away the last stone, and the faint light of the lantern revealed a small but intact space, protected from time. In the center, on a stone table, rested a thick book, bound in ancient leather and adorned with symbols Kyle recognized from the parchment. Beside it, a small wooden chest, simple but with an oxidized bronze clasp. With trembling hands, Kyle opened the book. Its pages were yellowed with age, but the script was clear, detailing not only more herbs and remedies, but also the true history of the Village of Shadows. It was not a cursed place, but a refuge for healers, a center of knowledge that had been sealed to protect it from a time of great darkness and ignorance. The plague was, in fact, a metaphor for the persecution of those who held healing knowledge, forcing them into exile and oblivion. The chest, when opened, revealed rare seeds and some simple but well-preserved gardening tools wrapped in linen cloth. Kyle felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. That place was not just a sanctuary of healing, but a bastion of resistance, a beacon of hope against oppression and oblivion. He was not just a guardian, he was a link in a millennial chain of wisdom. The responsibility deepened, but so did the unwavering certainty of his purpose. He would not only save his granddaughters, but restore truth, memory, and hope for all who would one day dare to seek the light. Kyle closed the book, his eyes welling up with a new understanding. He had to share this. He couldn't keep this secret alone, but with whom? Suddenly, a sound, a faint whimper, almost inaudible, coming from outside the church, a sound that was neither wind nor animal. Kyle froze, his heart leaping in his chest. It was a child's voice, and it seemed to be in danger. Kyle froze, his heart leaping in his chest. It was a child's voice, and it seemed to be in danger. The book and the chest on the stone table were suddenly forgotten. The responsibility of the legacy, the truth about the village, all vanished before the urgency of that faint, desperate sound. He turned abruptly, the lantern in his hand trembling slightly, and left the secret chamber, his eyes sweeping the church ruins. The whimper repeated, clearer now, coming from somewhere between the crumbled stones and the creeping vegetation that covered the east side of the structure. With the agility that adrenaline granted him, Kyle began to move, his steps careful over the debris. Every fiber of his being was alert, the protective instinct of a grandfather who had just rescued his own granddaughters from the brink of the abyss, now extending to that unknown sound. He thought of Ayla and Ilara, sleeping peacefully in the shack, and a pang of fear struck him. What if it was a danger to them too? But the voice was so small, so fragile, that compassion quickly overcame his apprehension. He crept through fallen stone blocks and thorny bushes, the lantern's light dancing ahead, revealing elongated shadows and dark nooks. The whimper turned into a muffled sob, and Kyle quickened his pace, his heart pounding in his chest. Finally, beneath a large, partially collapsed stone arch, he saw him. Huddled, trembling, was a boy. He couldn't have been more than 5 or 6 years old, his dark hair matted, his clothes dirty and torn. His thin arms were wrapped around his knees, and he was crying softly, his face hidden. Kyle approached slowly, crouching down to the boy's height, the lantern pointed at the ground, so as not to startle him. "Hello, little one," he said, his voice as gentle as he could make it. a contrast to the harshness life had imposed on him. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you." The boy slowly lifted his head, revealing large, frightened eyes full of tears. There was a dried blood stain on his forehead, and his lips were cracked and pale. He looked exhausted, hungry, and very cold. "Who are you?" the boy whispered, his voice hoarse. Kyle felt a pang in his chest. It was the same vulnerability he had seen in Ayla and Ilara. "I am Kyle. And you? What are you doing here alone?" The boy hesitated, then murmured, "My name is Finn. I got lost. My mother. She told me to run and hide." Fresh tears streamed down Finn's dirty face. Kyle slowly extended his hand, offering it. "Come, Finn. You're safe now. I'll take care of you." Finn looked at the wrinkled hand, then at Kyle's kind face, and with a trembling sigh, accepted. Kyle helped him up, feeling the fragility of the small body. He was freezing. The old widower wrapped the boy in a protective embrace, feeling the warmth of his own life trying to warm the little one. That village, which he thought was a sanctuary of healing for his granddaughters, now revealed itself as a refuge for others too. The injustice that had driven him from his lands seemed to echo in Finn's story. Kyle felt his responsibility expand, but also the certainty that he was on the right path. He couldn't leave that boy alone. "Let's go to a warm place, Finn. I have 2 granddaughters there, and they'll like you," Kyle promised, guiding the boy out of the church ruins. The way back to the shack seemed longer, but the weight of that small body in his arms was a burden Kyle gladly accepted. He knew that life in the Village of Shadows would be more challenging now, with another mouth to feed, another soul to protect. But feeling little Finn nestle into his chest, Kyle knew that love and hope were inexhaustible resources. The sanctuary of healing was beginning to take shape, a heart beating in the ruins. Kyle carefully guided Finn out of the church ruins, the boy's small body trembling in his arms. The lantern's light danced ahead, illuminating the path back to the shack, which now seemed a beacon of warmth and safety. The night's silence, once oppressive, now felt welcoming, as if the village itself was watching and approving its new guardian. Upon reaching the shack, Kyle opened the door with his foot and entered, closing it softly behind him so as not to disturb Ayla and Ilara's sleep. He gently placed Finn on a blanket on the floor, near the fire that still crackled. The boy was pale, his eyes almost closed from exhaustion. "I'll get some water and a clean cloth, Finn," Kyle whispered, his voice full of a tenderness he didn't even know he still possessed. He took a bowl of fresh water and a piece of linen, wetting it. With slow, careful movements, he cleaned Finn's dirty face, removing the dirt and dried tears. The blood stain on the boy's forehead was superficial, a scratch that Kyle treated with a little of one of the herbs he had gathered, applying it gently. Finn flinched, but didn't cry, merely watched him with those large, frightened eyes. "Does it hurt?" Kyle asked, feeling a pang in his heart. Finn shook his head negatively, a slight tremor still running through his body. Kyle took a piece of the leftover porridge and offered it to the boy. Finn ate eagerly, his small fingers gripping the bowl tightly, as if fearing someone would take it from him. Kyle watched, his chest swelling with a mixture of sadness and hope. Ayla and Ilara stirred in their sleep, but did not wake. After eating, Finn seemed a little more relaxed. Kyle wrapped him in a warmer blanket. "Now you rest, little one. You're safe here," he said, running his hand through the boy's matted hair. Finn closed his eyes, and within minutes he was asleep, his breathing regular and soft. Kyle sat beside him, watching the 3 small bodies sleep. The responsibility, once an overwhelming weight, now transformed into a purpose. He was not just a grandfather, he was a protector, a guardian of lives. The sun began to peek through the shack's crevices, painting the dirt floor with golden stripes. Ayla was the first to wake, her blue eyes blinking open. She sat up, stretching, and then noticed Finn. Her eyes widened in curiosity, and she looked at Kyle, a silent question in her gaze. "This is Finn, my little one," Kyle explained softly. "He got lost and needed help. Now he's safe with us." Ilara also awoke, and her eyes followed Ayla's to the sleeping boy. A small smile appeared on Ayla's lips, and she crawled a little closer, extending a tiny hand to touch Finn's blanket. Kyle felt his heart warm. Human connection, so rare and precious, was beginning to blossom in that forgotten place. He knew the day would be full of questions, of fears to be calmed, of a new routine to be established. But seeing the look of acceptance in his granddaughters and the peace on Finn's face, Kyle felt renewed strength. He didn't have much, but he had enough: love, a refuge, and the knowledge of healing. The village of shadows was no longer just his sanctuary. It was their sanctuary, a place where hope would sprout, stone by stone, life by life. He stood, ready for the new day, for the new challenges, with a heart full of unwavering faith. The legacy of healing and hope was expanding, and Kyle was ready to embrace every soul that destiny brought to his door. Kyle, the old widower, was ready to embrace every soul that destiny brought to his door. Ayla, with her curious blue eyes, was already approaching Finn, who was still asleep. Ilara, more timid, watched closely, holding her blanket. The morning sun warmed the shack, and the scent of damp earth and dried herbs lingered. Kyle knelt beside Finn, lightly running his hand through the boy's matted hair. He felt tenderness and concern. Finn's story echoed his own, of a family broken by cruelty, but there, in that reborn sanctuary, they would find a new beginning. Finn slowly opened his eyes, blinking against the light. His large, frightened eyes met Ayla's, who was sitting a few inches away with an innocent smile. "Hello," Ayla said, her childish, soft voice. Finn merely watched her, still with a trace of fear. Kale intervened with a reassuring smile. "Ayla and Ilara are my granddaughters, Finn. They are very kind." Ilara, encouraged, also smiled, a small but warm gesture. Finn slowly returned it, a glimmer of relief on his pale face. Kyle felt his heart expand. That was the first step towards Finn's healing, not just physical, but of the soul. He stood, his knees creaking, and went to the makeshift stove. "Who's hungry?" he asked, his voice cheerful. The three children raised their hands, and Kyle laughed, a sound that hadn't echoed with such lightness in a long time. He prepared a simple but nutritious porridge. As they ate, Kyle observed their interaction. Ayla and Ilara asked Finn questions about his origin. Finn, at first hesitant, began to murmur, revealing fragments of a hurried escape, of a constant fear. Kyle listened attentively, feeling the boy's pain, but also the resilience that was emerging. After breakfast, Kale took the book and the chest from the church. He needed to organize that knowledge. "Finn, would you like to help me plant some seeds?" Kyle asked, extending a small gardening tool. Finn's eyes lit up with interest. Ayla and Ilara, seeing their grandfather's excitement and Finn's curiosity, also wanted to participate. Together, they went outside the shack, where Kale had marked out the small space for the herb garden. The sun was warm, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Kyle explained to each child how to dig small holes, carefully place the seeds, and cover them with earth. Ayla and Ilara, with their tiny hands, imitated their grandfather's movements, while Finn, more hesitant, soon gave himself over to the task, feeling the fresh earth beneath his fingers. Kyle watched, his chest full of gratitude. There, in the simplicity of that act, was the essence of what he wanted to build. Not just to heal bodies, but souls, to sow hope. The seeds planted were of a future, of a community born from adversity. He knew the challenges would be immense: scarce food, rudimentary tools, and the threat of the tyrant still loomed. But seeing the children working together, laughing and getting their hands dirty, Kyle felt an unwavering strength. The village of shadows, once a place of dark legends, was transforming into a garden of life, a testament to human resilience and the power of love. Kyle was no longer alone. He had a family, a purpose, and the promise of a legacy that would flourish seed by seed. The light of healing and hope would take deep root in that soil, nourishing every life that found refuge there. The light of healing and hope would take deep root in that soil, nourishing every life that found refuge there. Kyle watched Ayla and Ilara's small hands, now dirty with earth, helping Finn plant the seeds. The boy, once so withdrawn, allowed himself a small smile as he felt the softness of the earth. It was a beginning, a tenuous thread of trust weaving between them, promising a future of unity and strength. The following days were a delicate ballet of adaptation. Finn, still marked by his escape, was silent, but his eyes followed Kale with apprehension and admiration. Ayla and Ilara, with the curiosity and innocence of childhood, tried to include him. Ilara, the more reserved one, offered Finn one of her brightest stones, a gesture that made the boy's eyes widen and accept with a shy nod. Ayla insisted on showing him the small sprouts in the garden, pointing to each with enthusiasm. Kyle felt the weight of responsibility grow, but also the deep joy of seeing life flourish. Each meal, however simple, was a challenge. He needed to ration what they had, and the search for edible food in and around the village became a daily task, now shared with Finn. The boy, despite his young age, proved surprisingly useful, with an agility for finding berries and roots that Kyle didn't notice. It was a new quest for sustenance that united the two in a common purpose. At night, while the children slept, Kyle pored over the book and the parchment. The yellowed pages revealed not only healing secrets, but also survival strategies and the history of how the ancient healers had established the village as a self-sustaining refuge. There were diagrams of simple traps for small animals, water purification methods, and the description of a hidden well, which Kyle promised to look for the next day. The shadow of the tyrant and the memory of the injustice that had driven him out still loomed. Kyle knew he couldn't ignore that threat forever. But for now, his priority was to strengthen that small sanctuary, to transform the Village of Shadows into a bastion of life and hope. He taught the children about the herbs, the importance of caring for the earth, the resilience of nature. Finn, in particular, absorbed every word, his eyes fixed on Kyle, as if the old widower were the sole source of safety and wisdom. One day, while Kale and Finn explored the ruins, Ayla and Ilara played near the shack. Suddenly, a noise. It wasn't the wind, nor an animal. It was the sound of something falling. And then, a cry. Kyle and Finn exchanged glances, Kyle's heart clenching. They ran back, icy fear coursing through their veins. Upon arriving, they saw Ayla sitting on the ground, her face red, a small wound on her knee. Ilara was beside her trying to comfort her. Kyle immediately knelt, examining the wound. It wasn't serious, but Ayla was scared. Finn, to Kyle's surprise, ran to the herb garden, picked some leaves Kyle had taught him for small cuts, and brought them, extending them to his grandfather. Kyle smiled, a smile of pride and gratitude. Finn had not only learned, but had acted out of altruism, out of connection. As Kale cleaned and applied the herbs to Ayla's knee, he felt a profound certainty. That place was not just a refuge, it was a school, a home, where wounded souls found healing and purpose. The seed of hope, planted with such care, was beginning to germinate, not only in the soil, but in the hearts of each of them. The Village of Shadows, once an echo of dark legends, was becoming a living testament to the power of compassion and unity. Kale knew the journey would be long, but he was no longer alone. He had a family, a legacy to protect, and the certainty that together they could face any adversity. The certainty that together they could face any adversity strengthened Kyle. That morning the sun rose with a different intensity, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, foreshadowing a change. Kyle, with the children still asleep, decided to look for the hidden well described in the book. With each step through the ruins, he felt the village's history beneath his feet, a tapestry of wisdom. He found the well beneath a dense layer of moss and ivy near an old stone wall. With effort, he removed the stones and revealed a narrow opening. The water, clear and fresh, was a blessing, a vital resource for his family's survival. As he filled the jars, a distant, almost imperceptible sound broke the morning silence. Kyle stopped, his heart racing. It was the trot of horses. The sound approached, heavy and constant, coming from the main trail leading to the village. The tyrant's shadow, once distant, now materialized. Kyle felt a chill down his spine, but it was a chilling determination, not fear. He would not flee again. Not with Ayla, Ilara, and Finn under his protection. He ran back to the shack, urgency overcoming weariness. The children were already awake, Ayla and Ilara playing, Finn watching them with a hesitant smile. The sound of the horses was closer, and Finn, with his experience, was the first to perceive the threat. His large eyes widened, and he cowered, his body trembling. "They're coming," Finn whispered, his voice laden with dread. Kyle knelt, embracing the three. "It's all right, my little ones. No one will hurt you." His voice was firm, though his heart beat like a drum. Ayla and Ilara felt the tension in the air. "We need to hide for now, but this place is safe. It's a sanctuary." He guided them into the church's secret chamber, the same place where he had found the book and the elixir, a small space, but the stone walls offered protection. "Stay here, quietly. I'll be back soon." With a last look at their frightened faces, Kyle sealed the chamber entrance, leaving a small crack for air. He took his lantern and the herb book, feeling the weight of responsibility. He was not a warrior, but a guardian. He walked to the village entrance, hidden behind a crumbled pillar. Dust rose on the horizon, and soon a small group of horsemen appeared. They were the tyrant's men, dark armor and stern faces. They stopped at the entrance, eyes sweeping the ruins with disdain. One of them, corpulent with a scar on his face, dismounted. "This place is useless, cursed," he growled, spitting on the ground. "The tyrant wants us to check if anyone has settled here." Kale felt rage bubble up, an ancient fury at the injustice, but he controlled it. He couldn't confront them with brute force. He had to use wisdom and cunning. He took a deep breath, his eyes fixed on the invaders, feeling the weight of destiny. He knew this was the decisive moment. The climax would not be a battle of swords, but a battle of wills and beliefs. He would step out of the shadows, not as a fugitive, but as the unwavering guardian of hope. Kyle, the old widower, his heart broken by loss and his soul gnawed by injustice, now rose to protect his new legacy and the promise of a future. He would not allow the tyrant's darkness to extinguish the light he had kindled. It was time to show that the Village of Shadows was not cursed, but blessed, a true sanctuary. Kyle watched the tyrant's men. The corpulent one with the scar on his face seemed to be the leader, his eyes sweeping the ruins with disdain. Kyle knew that brute force was not the answer. It had to be wisdom, the aura of the village itself, the belief in the legends that surrounded it. With slow, deliberate steps, Kyle emerged from behind the crumbled pillar. His white hair and long beard, the wooden staff in his hand, gave him an ancestral, almost mystical appearance. He did not look like a fugitive, but a guardian, a figure that belonged to those stones. "Greetings, travelers," Kyle said, his voice calm and resonant, echoing slightly in the ruins. The horsemen turned abruptly, hands on their sword hilts, Surprised by the sudden appearance, the leader growled, "Who are you, old man? What are you doing in this cursed place?" Kyle smiled slightly, a sad, knowing smile. "I am Kale, and this place is older than your legends, young one. It holds secrets few dare to unravel." He gestured with his staff to the surrounding ruins, a movement that seemed to encompass the entire village. "They say an ancient plague still haunts these stones, those who dare disturb its slumber. Well, they rarely come to a good end." He paused dramatically, his eyes fixed on the leader. "Does the tyrant seek something here? Gold? Lands? This place offers only the silence of the dead and the promise of a grim fate for intruders." The leader of the horsemen hesitated. Superstition was a powerful force in those times. He looked at his men, who seemed uneasy, some discreetly crossing themselves. "We are not afraid of old stories, old man. The tyrant wants to know if there is anything of value here." "Value?" Kyle chuckled softly, a sound that seemed to come from the depths of the ruins, laden with echoes of the past. "The only value here is the peace of those who have passed and the wisdom that nature offers. Your horses feel the heavy air, do they not? This soil does not accept greed. It repels those who come with impure intentions." Kyle knew he was playing on their ancestral fear, on the aura of a curse that the village itself carried. One of the horsemen coughed, and another shifted uncomfortably in his saddle, his eyes fixed on the shadows of the ruins. The leader, though he tried to maintain his authoritative pose, seemed less certain, his hardened expression wavering. "There's nothing here but a crazy old man and ruins. Let's go. It's not worth it." He looked at Kale one last time, a mixture of disdain and a pang of uncertainty in his eyes. "If the tyrant finds out you're lying, the tyrant will discover that this place is exactly as the legends describe it," Kyle interrupted, his voice firm and unwavering. "A place to be avoided. A place where life and death dance hand in hand, and nature reclaims what is hers." The leader motioned to his men, clearly convinced that the place wasn't worth the risk or the time. "Let's go. We have no time for ghosts and crazy old men." With a final glance at Kyle, who remained motionless, the horsemen turned around. The trot of their horses gradually faded, until it disappeared into the distance, taking the imminent threat with them. Kyle waited until the last sound completely dissipated. A deep sigh escaped his lips, laden with relief and exhaustion. The tension drained away, leaving his legs weak. But he had succeeded. The village was safe, for now. He hurried back to the church, his hasty steps echoing in the silence that now seemed denser. He reached the secret chamber and removed the stones with trembling hands, the lantern's light revealing the three small faces, pale with fear, but with eyes fixed on the opening, full of hope. "Grandpa!" Ayla and Ilara exclaimed in unison, running to hug him tightly. Finn, more restrained but with visible relief in every fiber of his small body, also approached, seeking the old man's safe touch. Kyle hugged them tightly, feeling the warmth of their small bodies, the life he had sworn to protect. "It's all right, my loves. They're gone. The village is safe." He ran his hand through Finn's hair, a gesture of affection and recognition. "You were very brave, little one." Finn looked at him, and Kale saw gratitude and a new confidence in the boy's eyes, a light that had once seemed extinguished. "They believed the legends?" Finn asked, his voice still a whisper, but with a tone of admiration. Kyle nodded, a tired but victorious smile. "Yes, they believed. And that's how we'll keep this place safe, as a sanctuary of secrets, of healing and of hope." He led them out of the chamber, back to the shack. The morning sun now shone fully, and the air felt lighter, purified, as if the village itself was breathing a sigh of relief. Kyle sat down, the three nestled close to him, seeking comfort and security. Ayla and Ilara, already recovered from the fright, began to chatter about what they would do in the garden, their eyes full of future plans and the innocence of childhood. Finn, for the first time, seemed truly relaxed, a small smile on his lips as he listened to the girls, the shadow of fear finally dissipating from his face. Kyle watched them, his heart overflowing with serene joy and profound gratitude. That village, once a place of despair and dark legends, had transformed into a bastion of life. He had faced the tyrant not with swords, but with the wisdom of the ancients, protecting not only his family, but the legacy of healing he had discovered. The injustice that had driven him from his lands had paradoxically led him to a greater purpose, a destiny he now embraced with his whole being. The path ahead would still be challenging, with uncertainties and obstacles to overcome, but Kyle felt a deep and unwavering peace. He was the guardian of that sanctuary, and every life he touched would be a seed of hope planted in that sacred soil. The Village of Shadows was no longer a cursed place, but a beacon, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering power of love. He looked at the blue sky, a promise of a new day, and knew that his legacy was just beginning, blossoming with each new morning. That blue sky, a promise of a new day, stretched infinitely over the Village of Shadows, and Kyle felt each ray of sun warm not only his skin, but his soul. The threat had passed, and the silence that followed was no longer oppressed by fear, but filled with the lightness of hope. Ayla and Ilara's laughter, now free of any lingering fear, echoed through the shack as they played with Finn, who for the first time seemed truly at ease. His eyes, once so laden with apprehension, now shone with childlike curiosity, and a genuine smile adorned his lips as he tried to keep up with the girls in their games. Kyle watched them, his heart overflowing with a gratitude so intense it almost hurt. That boy, who had arrived so broken, was finding a home, a refuge, a family. And his granddaughters, who had been on the brink of death, were now beacons of life and joy. Fate, in its cruel irony, had taken everything from Kyle, but had also given him a purpose greater than he had ever imagined. In the days that followed, life in the village took on a rhythm of building and healing. Kyle, with Finn's tireless help, dedicated himself to expanding the herb garden. Each seed planted was a vow of faith in the future. The hidden well ensured fresh water, and the survival methods described in the ancestral book became the foundation of their new existence. Finn, with his agility and intelligence, quickly learned to identify herbs, prepare the soil, and care for the small sprouts. He was no longer the frightened fugitive, but a dedicated apprentice, his eyes fixed on Kale, absorbing every teaching. Ayla and Ilara, in turn, were the little guardians of joy. They ran through the newly cultivated fields, their melodious voices spreading contagious energy. Kyle taught them about the healing properties of plants, about the importance of respecting nature and caring for one another. They, with the innocence of childhood, embraced each lesson, transforming learning into play. With each sunset, Kale sat with the children, reading stories from the ancient book, not just about herbs, but about the healers who had founded that place, about their vision of a sanctuary of peace and healing. He spoke about the importance of compassion, justice, and resilience. Finn, lying nearby, listened attentively, and Kyle realized that the words were planting seeds of courage and hope in his young heart. The Village of Shadows, once a name that evoked dark legends and ancestral fears, was transforming. The mossy ruins came alive with the green of new plants and the warmth of a family reborn. Kyle knew that the tyrant's threat still existed, but he had found a way to protect his home, not with force, but with wisdom and the mystical aura the village naturally possessed. That place was no longer a temporary refuge, but a legacy, a beacon of hope that he, the old widower, was meant to protect and nurture. He had lost much, but had gained an unwavering purpose. His heart, once shattered by loss and gnawed by injustice, now beat with the strength of a guardian, a healer, a grandfather. Kyle knew the path ahead would be long, but he was not alone. He had Isla, Ilara, and Finn, and the promise of a future where the Village of Shadows would be a sanctuary for all who sought healing and a new beginning. The light of hope, which he had kindled, would shine brightly, guiding lost souls to this oasis of life, where compassion and human connection would flourish forever. The light of hope, kindled by Kyle, guided lost souls to the oasis of life, where compassion and human connection would flourish. The days unfolded like petals, bringing discoveries and deepening family bonds. The Village of Shadows, once a refuge of despair, now pulsed with life. Kyle, calloused hands, light heart, dedicated himself to restoration. With Finn by his side, the church ruins, home to the reliquary and map, became a center for study and remedy preparation. The boy, agile and with a keen memory, was an exceptional apprentice. His small fingers, once accustomed to flight, now handled herbs delicately, grinding them into healing pastes, his eyes fixed on Kyle's precise gestures. Isla and Ilara, free from fever, blossomed like the garden plants. Their laughter filled the air, transforming the oppressive silence into melody. Kyle taught them about each leaf, each root, telling stories of the ancient healers and the wisdom of nature. He saw in them the continuity of the legacy, the promise that ancestral knowledge would not be lost. One afternoon, while gathering berries, Ilara stumbled and scratched her arm. Before Kyle could move, Finn calmly ran to the garden, picked some plantain and gently applied it to the wound, as Kyle had taught. Isla hugged her sister, offering comfort. Kyle watched the scene, a lump in his throat. It was not just physical healing, but of souls, the construction of a web of care and altruism that filled him with emotion. Despite the joy, Kyle still carried the shadow of loss and the memory of injustice. At the end of the day, when the children slept, he sat alone, gazing at the stars. He remembered his wife, his lands, the life stolen. A heavy sigh escaped him, a melancholy that refused to leave. It was an internal obstacle, the struggle to forgive, to let go of the past and embrace the present. Kyle knew that the Village of Shadows was a sanctuary, but to be a beacon of hope, he needed to heal himself, to allow the light he had kindled to envelop him. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Kyle noticed Finn was more thoughtful. The boy played with a piece of wood, his eyes distant. "What troubles you, my little one?" Kyle asked. Finn hesitated, then looked at Kyle. I wonder if my mother and father are well, if they would find me here." The question touched an old wound in Kyle's heart, the pain of uncertainty and separation. He knelt, holding the boy's small hands. "I don't know, Finn, but I know you are safe here, and that they, wherever they are, would want you to live, to find happiness." Kyle felt the responsibility of being a safe harbor for those young souls, the need to offer not just a home, but a future. He knew that healing was not just for the body, but for the spirit. Compassion was the greatest of elixirs. Kyle realized his own healing was linked to the children's well-being. By caring for them, nurturing hope, he was also healing himself. The village was a sanctuary of herbs and souls. With a warm smile, Kyle embraced Finn. The boy, for the first time, returned the hug with strength, burying his face in the old man's shoulder. It was an embrace of trust, belonging, of a new family under the restored ruins. Kyle felt the melancholy dissipate, replaced by unwavering certainty. He was not just protecting a legacy, he was living it, transforming pain into purpose, injustice into justice, solitude into lasting human connection. The village of shadows, with its secrets and promise, was ready to welcome not only physical healing, but that of all hearts that would one day dare to seek its refuge.